Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's event. This is another edition of the Frontend Dev Meetup anchored by Bincom Dev Center. And today we're going to be talking about JavaScript of the future. And we have two speakers who'll be speaking with us today who'll be discussing on that theme. So our first speaker is Mr. Ken Ovienadu. I hope I got that right. So he is a well-versed software engineer with reputable knowledge and experience in modern software development practices. Having made a career switch because of his love for software development, he has full stack knowledge and has served in multiple capacities in both front-end and back-end teams. He loves JavaScript, Typescript, but has working knowledge of Dart and Python. He currently serves as the lead developer at Learner's Corner and as a back-end engineer with Agromore Discovery and Extension Limited. Thank you for being with us, Ken. It's a pleasure to have you once again. You have the floor now. You can go ahead and speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to be here once again. I'm just going to jump in real quick. Okay, please let me know if my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ken Ovienadu, software engineer, and today we're talking about JavaScript of the future. And when I first looked at this theme, it sounded pretty vague because I feel that JavaScript is the future. Okay, but that's what we're talking about today. And a little bit about myself. I'm currently a full stack engineer at Agromore Extensions and Discovery Limited. I am also the lead developer at Learner's Corner. And yes, like the host mentioned, I have experience in both backend and frontend frameworks. Yeah, I love JavaScript and I play FIFA often. I'm not very good, but if you do happen to play, you can call on me anytime and I will be with you. So, yes, I am inevitable. I'm a Marvel fan, and when I saw that movie, Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, it sort of connected to me. And this particular scene where Thanos said he was inevitable actually strikes me. And I said, hey, I think JavaScript is inevitable too. So JavaScript is like Thanos, inevitable. But why do we say it is inevitable? Oh, well, let's just run through the history and see what has happened over the years, how it started, and what went down. Quickly, 10 days. Seems like a joke, but 10 days. This was all it took for Brandon Ike in 1995 to develop JavaScript. And while he did that while working as a software engineer at Netscape. And of course, the goal then was to lead the competition in the browser wars they had with Microsoft Internet Explorer. And he came up with JavaScript. But they didn't take it seriously, right? Because, a language that was just made in 10 days and it was running on the web. It was like a joke. People laughed, called it all sort of names, called it useless language, glue code. They say, hey, you just need it to run, just glue HTML and CSS together. This won't work. This is a waste of time. These were the comments that were made, right? But that did not stop the language itself from developing into what it is today. And fast forward to a couple of years later, I ran this search this morning, and number one, JavaScript. There are several sources that may say differently, but at the end of the day, if you look at the top 5 programming languages in the world, you find JavaScript there. And while so many developers, those that are coming from other languages like, C++ or C or Java, they're the ones that mostly just sort of bash down the language or talk down on it, and makes it feel like it's not worth it. But I think the numbers say differently. If you think about it, JavaScript runs on everybody's browser currently, and everybody on this call probably has JavaScript running on their device. Now, you can't say the same for most other mainstream languages, right? Because, certain operating systems work with specific languages, and it's a little bit tricky to say which runs where, right? But JavaScript as a language, it's inevitable, like I said. So it's on everybody's browser. You can't do without it right now. But how did JavaScript move from being a joke to being something that is in the mouth of everybody? The other day, I was talking with a friend, and he said, he's not a developer, but he said, hey, what are you going to talk to me about? Because normally I post things concerning JavaScript on my status, and just talk about it generally. And he said, hey, what don't you talk to me about? You want to tell me about JavaScript, Abi? And I was like, oh, you know JavaScript? He said, yes, he has heard about it. And I was like, okay, yes. So even people that are not in the tech ecosystem, they know JavaScript because it's like everywhere. And it didn't just get there. Certain things happened. Now, a while back in the day when JavaScript was introduced, it was just used to, do simple things on a web page. And for those of us who used the web, in the early 2000s and all of that, you would have noticed that then we had a lot of server-side rendering. So pages that had to reload on every click. You want to log into something, you enter your email and password, and you wait for a couple of seconds for it to take that data to the back end and then come back, and the page refreshes and shows you an error message. You can do that the same 10 times. It goes to the server and back 10 times. And the community said, hey, something has to change. And that was when Ajax was born. Ajax stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And it sort of paved way for Web 2, as some persons may choose to call it. Now, Web 2 enabled a lot of interactions on the web, and applications such as Gmail, eBay, and all of that just sort of leveraged on Ajax and made the experience, on the web desktop-like. So you click on buttons and you see things, just, responding to you, and you don't feel like you're running on the web any longer. You feel like it is a part of your system. It's no longer as slow as it used to be running on everything, where everything had to run on the server and come back. Ajax also gave way to the birth of frameworks such as Jquery, and Jquery did a lot of heavy lifting. I remember a couple of years back, writing JavaScript code without Jquery was painful and stressful. But Jquery came and it sort of, hid a lot of those implementations and gave a simple API to manipulate the DOM, handle animations, hide things, show things, and it was incredible. The world was happy about it, but it didn't stop there. A couple of years later, we started seeing frameworks such as React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, and right now there is a saying that the number of JavaScript frameworks out there are actually more than the number of JavaScript developers, right? I know that's a crazy statement. It's not true, okay? But some part of it is true, and which is that there are so many frameworks out there that you don't even know, you can't even count them, because everyone is trying to, build, an updated version, some kind of framework to do things better. And that is a good thing because it shows that the community really cares about, the language, and the community is trying to push things forward in a way that will benefit everyone in general. Moving forward, JavaScript no longer exists on the web alone. It has been ported to the server side using Node.js, and on mobile devices using React Native. So React Native allows you to build, applications for Android and iOS, right, using JavaScript. And it is a beauty, because what that means is developers no longer need to learn multiple languages to actually get things done. So you could have a React developer who is versed in JavaScript to say, hey, this company needs this. We are moving from a web application to a mobile application, or we want to have a mobile application to support what we have on the web. And it makes things pretty easy, right? You grab React Native, you reuse your components between the web and your mobile application, and everything works smoothly. Yes, the first version of React Native and what we have now is a little bit different, but the difference is always on the positive side, right? Because there have been lots of improvements to make it as native-like as possible. And yes, there are other frameworks such as Flutter and the one from C# Xamarin. There's also Ionic. But the fact that you can build mobile applications with React Native is just fantastic. With JavaScript, it's just crazy. It's beautiful. Node.js, on the other hand, enables developers to focus on just one language when working on the front end and the back end. JavaScript has also found its way in many other, areas like machine learning and the rest of them. So this progression, right, from where it was originally in 1995 to where it is now, has made it a worldwide language. So JavaScript has a place on the web where everyone has access to, and now even on mobile devices where people use their mobile phones on a day-to-day basis very regularly. What next? TypeScript. Dart. Now, one would ask, what does JavaScript have to do with Dart, right? But we'll get to that. But TypeScript seems a little bit familiar. Why? Because it is a superset of JavaScript, and instead of just compiles down to JavaScript, actually is to run on the web. So what's the benefit of TypeScript? Why did it come about? Well, as the JavaScript language grew and the number of users, the developers using it grew, there were certain things that were a little bit off, right? Because JavaScript by default is a dynamically typed language, and when building complex software, it becomes really tedious to work with work with such a dynamically typed language, and for improved developer experience and tooling, TypeScript was born. So TypeScript was built by Microsoft, and have it embedded in VS Code, and most of the frameworks and libraries now support TypeScript out of the box. Why? Because it increases developer productivity. It reduces bugs that would otherwise be caught when you actually run your code. You can actually see them, as you work. And this is something that other languages such as Java, give to us out of the box. It has great tooling, and Dart, for example, has great tooling as well. So moving on to Dart. Dart is also a modern language. It builds off of JavaScript and Java. So if you look at Dart code, it has lots of similarities with JavaScript. If you work with TypeScript regularly, you would easily be able to work with Dart, actually, because they look so alike. You would think that the Google team made Dart specifically for JavaScript developers that want to go into mobile developments, and it's sort of crazy, but I like it. Everyone likes that. That works with Flutter to create beautiful UI, and it's amazing. But then the reason why we're talking about this is because TypeScript and Dart, they are just some of the developments that have come due to JavaScript, right? So JavaScript gave birth to TypeScript and influenced the production or the development of Dart as well. So we can safely say that because of its widespread use, it is influencing a whole lot of things. And the people in charge of the web and companies are always looking to see how they can get things done faster. And they call on TypeScript, they call on Dart, or they fall back to JavaScript, as the case may be. Boom. How many of us have been to space? Probably none, but JavaScript has been to space, right? And that is a good thing, okay, because some time ago we heard of SpaceX and the Dragon. So I actually wanted to, give this tag this picture as JavaScript and the Dragon. I was like, hey, this is not a movie, slow down, right? So we have this. Some time ago in the SpaceX Dragon board, the UI, it was built using Chromium, and Chromium, runs basically on JavaScript, and it was amazing. And people were saying, hey, JavaScript made it to such a complex system. And yes, despite the fact that JavaScript did not actually run the complex part of it, because that would require some heavy computations, and that is not what JavaScript does, right? It was limited to the UI. So that is one of the drawbacks of the language that everyone is trying to get past, and that led to the birth of WebAssembly. Now, WebAssembly is described as the fourth language of the web. We know the basic three: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But what does WebAssembly do, or what is WebAssembly? Actually, WebAssembly is binary code. That's it gives near native performance, and it enables you, or enables developers to write performance code in a number of languages. C++, C, Rust, Go, even C#, and it sort of compiles down to WebAssembly, and it interacts with JavaScript. A while ago, I heard a friend of mine say, hey, WebAssembly is going to replace JavaScript, but that is not the case, right? WebAssembly is supposed to complement JavaScript, not replace it. Because at the end of the day, you need JavaScript to actually run WebAssembly on a page. So what WebAssembly is used for is it's used to handle the computationally expensive tasks. JavaScript is single-threaded by default, and it is bad at computations. So if you're trying to run some heavy computations, you would experience a lot of lag, your page will be frozen and all of that. But WebAssembly solves that for us, because it handles complex computations faster, because it uses near binary near native implementations. Moving on, mixed reality. The whole world was buzzed when Mark a while ago told us about the Metaverse. And we're like, is this possible? Yes, it is. We've seen it in movies. We've seen movies where you have people, using some sort of device on their eyes, hands, and they're able to manipulate objects off of space, holograms, and get things done. Popular example is Iron Man. Well, I'm not Iron Man, but I really love that character. We could see in many scenes where he uses his, AI. That's Jarvis, and he has lots. There's a lot of mixed reality going on in that movie, especially in the scenes that has to Iron Man. So that gives us a picture of what is possible. And with the introduction of the Metaverse, Meta, which is the rebranded name of Facebook, is currently pushing towards mixed reality on a day-to-day basis. And yes, this is something that exists on the web as well. So JavaScript is currently able to do that. Now there's virtual reality, and then there's also augmented reality, and there's a thin line between both of them. Virtual reality is you being immersed into a virtual world, right? You wear your device, your VR device, and you're no longer seeing what you're supposed to see around you. You're seeing a whole new world, and you're supposed to be able to interact with it. While augmented reality, you're seeing what you're seeing, but you can have some artificial objects on top that's meant to like enable interaction between the real world and the artificial world. So that's so there's a combination of virtual reality and augmented reality to give mixed reality, and that is supported on the web as well. There's an API available. I think it's WebVR, but that is deprecated now. It has moved on to WebXR device API. So in the future, developers would need to, or developers will be having to make this a reality on their pages, especially when the metaverse explodes, as we expect it to. We'll have to build applications that will be using a lot of mixed reality. So it'll be a good thing to sort of get acquainted with this as we go forward. There's also Web3 Js is something that we cannot just skip because it's like a buzzer beater right now. Everyone is jumping into Web3. Yes, JavaScript was not left out. It also supports that, and you can use JavaScript to work on the blockchain and implement smart contracts, and that work directly with Solidity and the rest of them, just to be a part of it. So at the end of the day, it is safe to say that JavaScript is the future, right? Because everything that's coming out, we have a community that is ready to push JavaScript to its very limits and also extend it. There's a team, the ECMAS scripts team is always there to make modifications to the language and keep adding features, as we go forward, just to make the language more relevant and practical on a day-to-day basis. So yes, the JavaScript of the future is JavaScript. JavaScript is the future. This is where I'll stop. Thank you very much. Host, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ken, for that presentation. And also thank you for sticking to time. Next up, we would have, sorry, Mr. Ken, we'll take questions after mine. Next up, our next speaker is Jacob Ijomah. He's a mobile app developer at Bincom Dev Center. If you're ready for us now, we're ready. Hello, Mr. Jacob, are you with us?
Okay. Can just take a few questions while I set up some things here. Please. Is that okay? Just brief questions so that I have time to solve.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I said you can just take some questions so that I have time to set up some questions.
Oh, okay, all right then. Mr. Ken, I have a question.
Okay.
Just while Mr. Jacob sets up. So sorry, what's the difference between a mobile app and a web app?
Okay. A mobile app is basically an application, that runs natively on a user's device, right? It doesn't have to be built using the native languages. For example, Android as an operating system, it has its own native languages used to write its native, app applications like Java, Kotlin, while iOS uses Swift and Objective-C, right? But there are other cross-platform frameworks that enable us to write mobile apps in using different languages and tools. But at the end of the day, the fact that we're exposing it to the device and its native API, right? It sits on the user's device and it has access to the user's native API. Web applications, on the other hand, are built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and a little bit of WebAssembly every now and then, and that is meant to be public to everyone. It doesn't require app stores like Play Store and App Store. It just needs you to have access to the internet and a browser, and you can access any web page on the web. So I think the difference between a mobile app and a web app is where you can find it. basically, and where it runs.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Jacob, are you ready for us now?
Just brief time.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, Mr. Ken, I want to ask, someone like me, I used to feel, okay, I'm not good yet in JavaScript. It's like I'm always seeing new things every day that is very complicated. That complicates things all the time while building maybe website or anything with JavaScript. I want to ask, like, what would be the good learning path in learning JavaScript?
Okay, to answer that, I'm just going to say this, right? You don't stop learning JavaScript. You learn every day, right? There are people who have been working with JavaScript for over a decade, and they still find something new about the language. So, coupled with the fact that we have lots of frameworks, lots of APIs coming in every day, it makes it difficult to keep up. But I think you should limit your learning to whatever it is that you want to work with, right? Say, for example, you're working on a project that requires you to use WebSockets. At that point, you could look up how to work with WebSockets and work with it using maybe Socket.io or natively, right? But you wouldn't do that because you just heard someone say they're working on a project with WebSockets and you just want to know what it is. It is going to drain you. So yes, you could set aside time to learn newer concepts every now and then. But I think the best thing is to keep practicing on what you're comfortable with. Once you know the basics, keep practicing with what you're comfortable with. And the more applications you build, the better your knowledge, because most of the applications will have like different implementations, and that will expose you to different parts of the language and how to work with them. So don't try to like gather as much information at a time. No, just go on a project per project basis, and you're going to find that things will work out easier.
Okay, so thank you very much for that.
Right, Mr. Jacob, we have you now.
All right. Comment, please. Mr. Mike, sorry for that. If more questions can still go on, along the way I will say it as something couple on my system.
Sorry, Mr. Jacob, I didn't get that.
Okay, I say something crop up on my system now that I'll share a second screen now to start with. My Zoom client just developed some issues now. I don't know. I'm on with you now with the phone.
Okay, do you have your slides with you? You can send your slides to me, then I'll help you present. If that's okay. We can do it that way, Mr. Jacob.
Okay.
Just send me an email, then I'll help you out with that.
What's up?
So, sorry, while he's trying to rectify that, we can take more questions now. If anybody has any, if you have any question at this moment, for the first speaker. Please, you can come up and ask. Okay, Mr. Ken, one more question. Okay. So according to your profile, you have experience in both back end and front end. So how did you start off? Because you said you made a career switch. Did you start with back end, or did you start with front end, or did you like go into both of them at the same time? How did you do it?
I started with front end, right? But during my freelancing period, I noticed there was sometimes I needed to work on some back end, so I had to like dive into that as well. And I sort of worked with a team over the years that also sort of pushed me to work more and develop my backend skills. So yeah, became quite employable on both fronts. So right now it's easy to just jump onto anything. Depends on the complexity and what I'm supposed to achieve.
Well, all right, that's pretty cool. Okay, one more question. For a front-end developer, obviously you work with JavaScript, right? What about a back-end developer? Do they work with JavaScript as well?
Yes, and that is one of the things that I did mention. The birth of Node.js was a game changer because many persons believe that JavaScript, was just meant to be run on the front end side. But Node.js as a runtime enabled us to use JavaScript to also write, valid server-side code that will interact with databases and that will interact with databases and just work on some complex logic. And yes, I've been working with Node.js for over 2 years now, and it has been solving all of my backend issues.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from any other person from the audience? Any questions from the audience? While we wait for the second speaker to.
Okay. I don't know. I was pretty distracted but my network was faulty when you were talking about. So now, I still want to ask, from being a front-end developer to be a full-stack developer, what's the process like? Someone that is just starting to learn frameworks, JavaScript, and all. Like, how can they start their journey to become a full-stack developer?
Okay, being a full stack developer is a long journey. The truth of the matter is, right now it's better to focus on one side because it's actually so broad, right? The backend world is broad as well. The front end world is actually pretty broad and it's dynamic. So, yes, it's challenging. But if you wanted to do that, the easiest way would be to go with a language that allows you to work on both sides. And that's where JavaScript comes in. So you could take a day or two to start playing with Node.js. And trust me, it's actually pretty simple to get started with Node.js and Express. And in a day, you could start putting up your own servers. There are lots of platforms available to help you quickly deploy your Node.js server-side code, such as Heroku and AWS. But I think you should stick with Heroku if you're just starting out because it makes it easy to just deploy your code. Basically, you can deploy straight from your system, or you can just make a push to a repo if you're using version control, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, right? It just picks it up from there and deploys it, and you can make your calls from your front end to the back end to test how it is. It is something that I would advise every front end developer to just try out every now and then. You just play around with the back end, play around with Node.js, and just see how data flows from the front end to the back end to the database and back. Right, it's going to give you a broader picture, and I mean, yeah, that extra knowledge is vital in some cases.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. One question from someone. He's asking, how do I overcome laziness? So I think I'm just going to paraphrase. Maybe he's asking, how does he overcome like the stress of being overwhelmed by having a lot to do with learning or trying to learn a language or something, but then you can't find motivation or stuff like that. So how do you advise this person, Mr. Ken?
Have a project in mind, right? So the best way to learn a language or framework is to work on a project with it. So let's say you're working on the front end and you're trying to learn Angular, right? You can't just watch videos or do something. You first need to have a project. So when you have your project down in your head, you have to put it down on paper. Some sort of project management technique that you may use. You could just write down your task on paper, think about the pages that you want to work on, and give yourself realistic deadlines, right? It's not a do or die affair. So if you say you're working on a blog application, for example, using Angular, you could have like a blog list page, that's the home page. You could have like a page to add a blog post, a page to edit, like a view to delete. So if you list those views out, you can kind of estimate how long it takes you to work on those. If there's a design that you like, fine. If there's none, you could play around with Figma, but I mean, there are designs everywhere on the internet. So you could just grab one or look at a website that you want to copy, use that design. So it all boils down to self-discipline. Because after you've taken note of what you need to work on and you've given yourself realistic deadlines, you still need to tell yourself, okay, I will need to work on this from this time to this time, this time to this time. And before you know what's happening, you become quite adept with that language or framework. So if you work on like 2-3 projects with it, you get to a point of being very comfortable with that language or framework, as the case may be.
All right, thank you. One more question from my end. While learning JavaScript or while heading out to learn JavaScript, are there like what are like the basic things you need to know, like foundational knowledge that one requires to have before going to learn JavaScript, or is it just very easy to learn?
Okay, JavaScript is hard if it is your first programming language, right? But it gets better. Okay, so people will tell you, you can learn this. Yes, you can learn it, but it will take some getting used to, especially if you've not written a line of code before. So right off the bat, there are certain concepts that you need to just lay your hands on, because everything about JavaScript or programming language generally is all about data manipulation. So you just need to learn how to say, hey, this is a piece of data that I want to use, and this is how I want to use it, and this is the kind of output that I want. So, you should learn how to declare your variables of different kinds. It could be a list of items, it could be an object that represents an entity. It could be numbers, it could be strings, it could be data from a form, right? Know how to manipulate that data. What do you want to do with that data? Do you want to just get the data from the user, or do you want to save it somewhere, or you want to manipulate it somehow? Basically, that's what JavaScript does for you. It just gets data manipulated. And frameworks like React, Vue, they just enable you update the UI based on that data. So you just have to learn the different data structures, not the complex ones you see online nowadays. Like when you type data structures, you can see plenty things. You see queue, you see linked list. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the core, data types in JavaScript, your strings, arrays, booleans, objects, null, undefined, right? Those basic things. You need to know what you can do with each of them, and every data type has its own methods and ways of manipulating it. So for a string, for example, you can loop through it, so you can work on every item, right? For something like a string, you can concatenate it with another string. You could do all sorts of things to it. Numbers, you can add numbers, you could subtract, you could just perform arithmetic on it. So getting the basics of understanding the data types and how to manipulate them. That's all. That's all. Once you get that down, you understand that you use functions to, essentially manipulate this data. And from functions, you can move on to having classes and learning more about object-oriented programming. So yeah, I think that's a good way to go.
All right, thank you so much for that. There are a couple of other questions, but it seems our second speaker is ready for us now, so we'll take his presentation, then we'll continue with questions later. Mr. Jacob, are you ready for us now? Hello, Mr. Jacob. You're muted if you're trying to speak.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yeah, it came on and went up. I can't see it right now. I don't know about the rest. Can anyone see his screen?
No, can't see it. It came up before, yes.
All right. I will, let me set it now.
Okay. So like I said earlier, Mr. Jacob Ijomah is a mobile app developer at Bincom Dev Center.
Mr. Michael, you missed a question in the chat box.
Sorry, Benjamin, what was that?
You missed a question in the chat box. Someone sent a question, but you didn't respond to it.
Yes, I said we'll take the other questions after the second speaker has made his presentation. So questions will come later on. Apologies for that, but
okay.
Just have to continue with the second speaker for now.
Just note the question.
Right, Mr. Jacob, you can go on now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but there's an echo. I think that's the volume of your device.
Can you see my screen as well?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. All right. Sorry for the delay. I didn't preempt it. All right, and I encountered some software issues here just now. Okay, I guess I'm good to go, Mr. Mike.
Yes, you are. Carry on.
All right. So, is my camera on?
I can't see your face. If your camera is on, I can't see your face.
Okay. All right, why I put that in order? We are looking at JavaScript here. JavaScript of the future. And sorry. I guess you can see me now.
Yes, we can see you, but we can't see your screen.
Okay. Everything should be fine now.
Perfect. Yeah, you're good to go. Carry on, please.
So, I'm Ijomah Jacob by name, mobile app developer, just as Mr. Mike have introduced me earlier. And today, quickly, we'll dive into JavaScript, just as Ken has did some good jobs on it. I'll just do a little icing, icing of the cake. All right. So, as we look at JavaScript, it started somewhere. In other words, JavaScript has a past there's a present, and there's a future. That's the beauty of it. Some technology may have a past, have a present, but there's no prospect. And you can convincingly tell a young developer or a young person coming to picking a programming language, that's okay, you can take on this line and you will not be stuck along the way and off the industry, just because you took a technology that had a past, had a present, but there was no future. All right, so the objective, just quickly look at the past, the present, and the future. And just like a movie, those back then, so we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. JavaScript does same as well. From the emergence, just like Ken has stated earlier, from 1995, the past, and move on, evolve from the person that invented it, from Netscape, and it's pressed on to the European Computer Manufacturers Association, which in short, known as Ijomah. And as at that time, Netscape and Brenda Ike decided to take the language to the European Computer Manufacturers Association for the purpose of standardization. And it went on from there. Then the ugly part is there was a division in the course of that when it was taken to Ijomah and it was standardized in 1997. Then Netscape have to hand it over to Ijomah. Then the evolution starts on from then on. And since it was for the browser, and other tech gurus, Microsoft, Google, Mozilla, Firefox, Mozilla Foundation, all were all interested in the browser technology. And JavaScript was the next move. Then adoption of different versions. So a meeting was held with the tech gurus as at that time. And in the meeting, they were looking at evolving JavaScript to the next version. The meeting split up into two camps. That's the ugly part. There was division for a whole year. Google on one side, Microsoft on one side, Mozilla on one side, just in two camps. Of course, Brenda was worried about that and went ahead. After a year, it's okay. They came to a consensus. And Brenda published an article and declared that the bottleneck so far, the division so far is over. And that was when JavaScript moved forward from ECMAScript 5 to ECMAScript 6, so, which it is known as ES6, ES5, ES6. Then from then, it has proceeded further to produce more versions on that. So this was the conflict. Now, a committee has to be formed, technical committee 39 in Oslo, to look into that. And that was resolved. And they moved forward. Then afterwards, to standardize the community have to come out, the Ijomah standard and the TC39. And that is what actually gives JavaScript a strong past and a reasonable presence and a bright future, in the sense that there's a body that is interested in the evolution of JavaScript. That gives JavaScript a future. And the body comes to agreement in implementing a particular feature based on consensus of the different bodies. And with that consensus, it can give support, it can bring support of different browsers by different vendors. Of course, you know, we have the Microsoft Edge. Back then, Internet Explorer, though Internet Explorer has become an history now. According to Douglas, he said Internet Explorer does not cause joy, but that's going away now. But there's Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome is there, the Opera Minis are there, and Mozilla Firefox browser is also there. So there has to be an agreement to proceed with each of the versions that will be released for JavaScript. And that gives JavaScript a future. And if you come under the ECMA standard, there are each feature that will be implemented or executed or accepted on a year-by-year basis have to pass through some stages from stage 1 to stage 5. Asynchronous operations, private fields, classes, implementing classes, and the rest. And looking at some of the shortcomings that JavaScript have, proposals comes up, submitted to the ECMA standard for evaluation, and it has to go from stages to from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, before finally to be adopted and accepted into the language library as one of the feature that developers can actually use. And anyone can bring up the proposal, provided you are registered on a particular standard. So that's consensus kind of thing gives JavaScript a future, apart from the huge community that is behind it. So just as 5 stages involved, and the ECMA script to get that feature accepted and implemented. All right, now the present. What do we do with JavaScript today that we can't do with it in the past? So the possibility today was absent in the past because of this evolution and the strong body of standardization behind it. Also, the community support also helps that to be implemented by the developers on any feature that has been developed. All right. For the present, you can see that JavaScript solves a lot of issues, and there's a backbone behind it. Just like I mentioned earlier, the big community behind it. Then look at the proper way of evolving, and look at the whole ecosystem behind JavaScript. Then if we look at the future, just like Ken mentioned earlier, the mixed reality and the rest, we can predict what will happen in the future based on the current trend and past experience. And what is the current trend? The current trend is that, of course, more developers are adopting it, getting engaged with the language, rolling out frameworks, pulling out libraries. The NPM is their node package manager, which helps in solving a lot of issues, both on the front end and back end, still based on JavaScript. And of recent, I was going through the NPM websites, and you can see dozens of libraries that are released from different angles, just to support whatever application that you want to run using JavaScript. And today, if I do an NPM install, I could just count. That was yesterday. I was just looking at just doing an NPM install and installing a node module. I was seeing over half a gig libraries that has to come into your system to help whatever project you have to be executed, served, and developed quickly and easily without much stress. And most of them are automated. So that's almost half a gig package coming to your system. We're all just library published from different angles, put together on the NPM site, that with a little command, you have all you want to do your job. That is quite beautiful. And for the future, presently, there are some JavaScript features that are still in process, still in the stages of the ECMAScript, evolving, and will be released, of course, this year, and of course, next year. And all of them may not be exhausted, and the ones that are approved, of course, next 2 years, some features are coming in that are passing through the stage 1, stage 2, that still will come into the language, just to improve it, make it better, and help developers to solve their problems and get along with the projects they work on. And that tells us that JavaScript has a future. All right. Now, the future comes with new features. Classes and methods that were not there before comes in, and some people will claim, JavaScript is not an OOP. No problem with that. But there are still some features that can be implemented with the help of the classes and methods that are being evolved and added into the language through the ECMAScript process. Sorry, okay. So the new features. Classes, of course, in object-oriented programming is well understood. Nevertheless, it's also been adopted into JavaScript, and improvement on it is still ongoing, just to make the language a robust one that can do all kinds of work in the course of development that it will be needed for. All right, so I just picked a handful of them, just few, as time will permit us to just look at. And this is some of the classes and methods that I imagine for 2022, that's this year. And looking at by June, more will be standardized based on the research that I've made so far. And some of them, you can see string.prototype.replace all. This one has a way of picking the strings, some letters or characters or words in a set of string, replacing them with a different one, which makes front-end development more interesting and make the UI appealing to the end users. I was checking up in one of the sites earlier. And just come up to the site and you see popped up, replacing the one that was there before. And just like that. And just with that, different sense are communicated from that front end. And that is the power of JavaScript brings with the help of class and method, introducing this replace all or replace method. We're having private slots and top level await method in modules. Then we're having some of them like error.cause, just to find the root cause of some issues as you program along. Now, the private slot may look, if you look at Typescript, C#, all those object-oriented program, you discover there's keyword like public, private, in the course of defining interfaces. That is as well as coming into JavaScript, but with a different syntax. By adding an hash sign to a method, that could make a method private, and it should not be accessible outside the class. And I have some few code here to display. I don't know if time will still permit me. All right. Apart from the libraries and packages, for those that are just coming in, this is not for the gurus. You can just get a little package from GitHub that will help you to just scale up on your JavaScript scale while you are trying to pick the language scale as you go along in your professional pursuit. And you can just quickly go to Google, type WPK or Webpack Starter. With that single project, you'll be fine to just kick up, set up a development environment in a short while, and you are off with coding via VS Code, and your code has served on the browser under the development console easily. But while that is going on, let me just pull it up and show us some of the things we have here. Yeah, hope you can see my screen. So, am I still on?
Yes, you are. We have 10 more minutes, please.
All right. All right, Mike, please, if you can alert me of the time. If
yeah, just 10 more minutes.
Okay, so I just put you can just go, it's a tool you can make use of. You can just go to Google, your browser, and okay. You can just go to your browser and type Webpack Starter. Webpack, just a seed project that can help you to work with your JavaScript as you develop your skill in that language. And once that comes up, you can clone the project, install it on your system, do npm install, and you'll be fine. So this is it, WPKD. And once you launch it, it leads you to the GitHub page where you can find it, and you can clone the project, and off you go. So this is it. I've already done that. So once you install it, do npm install.
I can't.
Browser, and
sorry, I don't think that particular Windows is being shared.
Exactly, I can't see your screen.
It's not being shared. Oh, sorry.
Showing a different window.
Okay. Sorry for that. Let me do a new share. But let me share the entire screen. Okay. Can you see it now? Can you see it
Yes,
now?
I can.
All right, so this is the project. With the Webpack Starter, once you type it on the Google, it gives you the GitHub link. You can click it, come here, clone it, pull it down to your system, do npm install, and off you go. Then you can drive into the page, into the file in your VS Code, the source folder rather, get to the script, and it will lead you to your VS Code, which is where I am now. Can you see the VS Code?
Yes.
Okay, so with this, you can write multiple codes in it, console log, and pull up your browser, and it will be served there. You see the console log messages. So some of the classes, just like I said earlier, that the new features that have been introduced into JavaScript, you can quickly test some of them on this place. So I have some of them here already. I wouldn't want to type not to waste our time. So I just have them commented out here. So with this, you can get up with your JavaScript development, and this will help you to develop your skill as you go along in the language. All right, so just a simple demo as I proceed. I just do a console log from here. Do an npm install, pull up the terminal, do an npm install to npm start to start the web server, the local server, and then you head over to your browser. Here I'll be using Chrome, and I'll be using Mozilla Firefox to get this done. All right, can you see the Mozilla Firefox browser?
Yes.
All right, so it's served on localhost port 8080, and whatever code you write and console log, open up your developers tool, it will show up under the console, and you can do all kinds of code, code there, and more than one line, 2 line, any line, and just test as you go along in the course of just building your skills, try your hands. And of course, JavaScript programming requires practice and all that. So some of the methods that came into place, just like I mentioned earlier. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. You have 5 more minutes left.
Okay, 5 more minutes. Thank you, Michael. So with a simple hello world is already there. If you from our console here, and this is just the Webpack package that was pulled from the GitHub and served. Then your development goes on. So quickly, if I head back to my VS Code, just have a simple. There are still other codes there, but for the sake of time, just demonstrate one. But if you have that Webpack tooling in your system, that will help you to get along with JavaScript easily as you practice along. All right. So to demonstrate the new feature that came into the language, I have it here, just like this is a constant, just like I said earlier. You said JavaScript is a scripting language, and JavaScript can be used both in front end and back end. But in this case now, we are console logging a method now. We want to replace all the JavaScript words in the string with Typescript. And once you console log say string.replace JavaScript in string, then whatever word you want to pass to replace it in the string is fixed as a second parameter. So once you save this, head over to your browser. Under the developer tool, you'll find the changes being served on your developers tool. And here is it now. Earlier, the string says JavaScript is the best scripting language. JavaScript can be used for both front end and back end. But in this case now, since we have used a method, replace, so we're replacing the first word, JavaScript, with TypeScript. And once you serve console log it, check up in your developer tools, you no longer see JavaScript is the best scripting language, but rather you see TypeScript. All right. So before my time elapses, I will head back to my slide because I will not have time to test out the whole method that I have on my VS Code. All right, so back to my slide. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so now we have a lot of libraries, frameworks, packages that are based on JavaScript, and some of them have been touched already. Then the future, of course, is having support for machine learning, and also native brain interface is also available via JavaScript. And the beauty part of it is that as technologies emerge, goes along, developers will want to make use of or work with those technologies. And if they are JavaScript based, they'll say, okay, how can we use our normal language of work to really meet this need, this emerging technology? Then the community will go into work, and before you know, libraries comes up, frameworks comes up, native support emerges, and that gives the language a future. And now JavaScript can support machine learning and other native brain interfaces that even emerging and come, even the mixed realities and all that, because developers want to use what they have, the knowledge they have already, because it's not easy to divert it to another language and just learn and get along with the new technology that is coming up. So the need for using JavaScript to do whatever I want to do as a developer, since you already have it as a residual knowledge, would definitely give the language, is giving the language a future. So what could be your review based on what you have had so far? Does JavaScript has a future? You can give your review with this. Can you say 5-star that indeed JavaScript has a future and all that? But from what my own end, I think that JavaScript has a future. Looking at the past and the present, I can predict the future. So in conclusion, JavaScript still remains relevant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacob, for that. All right. I don't know if any other person has a question from the audience, but there is this question that we didn't attend to. So permit me to bring it up. So I guess it's for any of the speakers. So someone is asking, I want to make a career switch from medical line to tech. anyone in Lagos to teach me, please. So I think it's kind of vague. Maybe, I don't know if the person is trying to seek out counsel on career paths to like particular field to go into in the tech industry. So, Mr. Ken, what would you say to this person?
There's a lot going on there, right? And truthfully, you can switch from any career path into tech. It just depends on the area that you are particularly concerned about. You could go into development, or if you have an eye for design, you could look at UI UX design, go into project management. So I'd say it depends on what you want to do first, and the next thing will be to jump on the resources. There are lots of free resources for any of the paths you choose. You could reach out to me in case you want to talk about that some other time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jacob, do you have anything to contribute to that? Mr. Jacob, you're muted. Can't hear you.
That's fine. You want to come into tech? That's okay. You can come in. The world is broad, and especially the tech world is broad, and it has a space for you. That's what I will say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other question from the audience? Any other question from the audience? Here's the time for questions now. Okay, so since no one is having any other questions, I would like to ask one, and any of the speakers can go ahead to clear me. So between back end and front end, which of these areas of development is much easier to break into? Both of you are smiling now. I don't know if the question is vague or what. Please, I need clarification. Either of you can go ahead and clear me on that, please.
Jacob, you want to take that?
Ken, you can go ahead.
Okay. Truth of the matter is, I think the front end is easier to jump on. You can pick up HTML in a few days, and CSS will take like a couple of weeks, but JavaScript will take a couple of months as well. On the back end, you just have to learn one language, and you have to also think about databases and how to interact with databases. The back end is actually a little bit more complex than the front end, because basically what you're working on the front end is basically going to render on the user's browser, and it's easier to easily see what's happening. It's easier to debug. So that's a good starting point for beginners. Backend, on the other hand, it has a lot of dependencies. When you're working with a server, you need some sort of API testing tool. You need to have, it's a form of database, on your local machine or somewhere in cloud. You need to worry about how to deploy continuously, monitor not just your server, but your databases. Talk about uptime, downtime. There's a lot of jargons on the back end. So yeah, basically, I think the front end is the easier route to take. That's why you see so many front end developer roles, but the back end guys are scarce actually.
Okay, thank you for that. So your advice is, if I'm to make a break in tech, I should choose backend, since there is a scarcity of backend developers.
Well, the truth is, if you do backend, right, you have like high prospects, but the challenge there is, it's not like front end that you can just say, hey, this is what I've done. Someone can just look at a website or look at an app and say, okay, yeah, okay, you could do this. This is good. But if you're building the backend, you have to work with APIs, and sometimes they'll most likely have to go through your code, and it's not easy to explain to someone what you have done, using your code just like that, because most persons don't want to listen. So there's always a challenge there. Yeah, but I mean, it's not really easy to find backend roles, even though they are scarce, because most companies want to get backend developers that are actually experienced. So you might have some trouble starting out. You might have some trouble starting out, but on the front end, I think companies can actually, they can actually just say, okay, yeah, you can come and learn here. On the back end, it's a different story.
All right, thank you so much, Ken. Jacob, would you like to add to that?
What I have to add, just like Ken said, you can front end, it's will be a bit easier based on the technology he mentioned. But the issue with front end now is the avalanche of frameworks. Avalanche of frameworks that is over there that you may need to pick again, apart from just picking the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Though you may find some companies also that it's okay, you can come in with that, but along the line, you have to upgrade to maybe a particular framework and all that, just for you to be able to meet the demand that they have in their technological stack. Or some will just specify clearly for front end. If you don't have any framework expertise or at least some proficiency in some frameworks, you can't come in. So that is another thing to consider while making choice from the front end angle. So that is what I have to add in that regard.
Okay, so frameworks, are they designed to make the developers' life easier, or are they there to checkmate excesses or something like that? Since you're saying like if you're thinking of going to the back end, then there's avalanche of frameworks to work with. So I just need to know, are they there to make work and life easier for the developer, or are they there to checkmate excesses and stuff like that to make sure that the developer is working according to best practices or stuff like that? I don't know if the question is clear.
Yes, it's clear. The frameworks are there actually to ease the work of the developer. Yes, but on the other hand, you have to pick a basic knowledge of them, which will take a bit of your time. But if you're able to pick it, fine. So the frameworks are not there to make things difficult. They're actually to make the work easier. For example, if you're picking up Angular as a framework, working with it and all that, it's fine. It makes work easier. In fact, to ensure best practices and all that, there's some procedures you have to take. But those little principles there too in those frameworks, you still need to pick them. And that will take a bit of time. After learning your basic JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So in a nutshell, frameworks are there to make the front end work easier. Apart from just the frameworks, if you check out the jobs out there too, they're even adding more to the front end requirements. So if you're even talking about framework, some might even say, okay, front end should also have knowledge of designs like Figma and the rest as well. So it's also increasing the demand that is required from a front end developer. But all of them, if you're able to pick all of this, the Figma, having some of ideas or interest in colors as well, just because you are giving what the customer is going to see. So what you are presenting, you are presenting to the customer, and it is so you have to be market or customer centered in your front end angle in order to be able to deliver a reasonable product at that end. So companies will now have to demand some of the things. If it's a company that there's no clear, maybe if it's a small company that there's no clear cut between, oh, designer should be separate, front-end developer or should be separate and all that. So that could also add to the things that front-end developers have to get in order to break through into the industry. Thank you. I don't know whether that helps.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Thank you so much for that reply. So at this point, we'll take one more question if we have any. If not, I will go ahead and make my presentation. Any question from the audience? Okay, I'll take that code silence as a no. So permit me to make a presentation. I'll share my screen now. And Mr. Jacob, can you kindly stop sharing so I'll be able to share my. Okay. All right. Is my screen visible? See my screen now. I need a confirmation that my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for that. Okay, like I said at the beginning, this meetup is anchored by Bincom Dev Center. And Bincom Dev Center is a multi-location technology talent development and solutions platform. We have we're located in several places. First of all, virtually near you, we have locations at Lagos, Oyo, Kaduna, and the rest of them. So you can find out full list of our locations at blog.bincom.net/campuses. And we offer a number of services. These are, as you can see here, this is a list of services that we offer. We have the Bincom Academy, we have the Bincom Tech Internship, the Bincom Tech Apprenticeship, the Bincom Community Events and Projects, the Light Space, we have the Bincom Global Tech Program, the Migrate Program, the Bincom Mentoring Platform, Labs by Bincom. All right, so let's get down to some of these services one after the other. First we have is the Bincom Academy, which is an intensive training program facilitated by Bincom Dev Center. So each technology application development class is typically 4 weeks of intensive training, during which means you won't be spoon-fed. You'll be required to do some work on your own, because we believe by you learn by doing. So I believe that's a popular saying anyway. You learn by doing. So that's so we have a couple of classes available, and we have Python, mobile app, PHP, foundation, graphics, and the rest of them. So if you want to find out a full list of these classes, visit bincom.net/academy. You can also apply for any of these classes there. So we have the Light Space, which provides helpful workspace intended to encourage collaboration and drive innovations in startup ecosystem. So we have spaces for various events like seminars, conferences, get-together, meetings, co-working space, and you can name that. So we have this across our locations. You can find out availability of this Light Space at blog.bincom.net/campuses. The next day is the Bincom community events and projects. These are get back at giving back to the community and building the tech ecosystem in our own way. So they focus on informing and exposing the youth to the current technology trends and how to prepare for the future in tech. So basically these events are divided into 5. We have the masterclass, meetups, idea sharing, explore on the move, challenge, and brainstorm. Some of our other initiatives include the Bincom Tech Network and the Bincom Tech Club. So the Tech Club is the Tech Network, the platform where we have different classes for Bincom Academy. So each class in the Bincom Academy will have a dedicated channel, and communication between participants and facilitators would go on there to facilitate learning, and also for easy access to facilitators as well, in case participants have any issues during the course of their training. So we have the meetups, under which we have a PHP, cloud hosting, Frontend Dev Meetup as well, and the rest of them. We'll have the master classes, under which we have the Bincom Startup School, Social Lender, Digital Financial Services. We have the Technology Enhanced Learning, the EdTech series, and the Idea Sharing series, under which we have the Bincom ICT Career Talk, which we hold every last Saturday of every month. All right, so if you were not part of the last career talk we had, you should definitely plan to attend the next one, which will be on the 26th of this month. So moving on, we have the Bincom Global Tech Program, which is a program to help tech enthusiasts or anyone launch a career tech globally. So this program is focused on 3 key pillars. First one is to learn skills, second is to gain experience, and then the last is to gain exposure. All right. So during this period, you'll be taken across various classes depending on the knowledge track you choose, and you have mentors to guide you through. And also, you'll also be part of the community, because that's one way of learning as well. When you experience and knowledge, which should help you improve and help you develop your own career as well. So we have a program that helps you, that you can start learning now, and then after you've become an expert in your field. So if you're having the worry of not being able to afford this, that shouldn't be a worry at all, because Income Dev Center has got you covered. You can learn now and pay later with the income sharing agreement. All right, so I have a video to play, which would explain the income sharing agreement in detail. Sorry, just a moment. I guess this is not.
But you don't need to worry. You don't need to have any money to even
Sorry, can you make it?
What that simply means is paying back when Ijomah experience and exposure, the company
Apologies for that.
those are it's just 1.2 million. But we cover the cost of the program, having the options that are available for this program is and for the period of 1 to 2 years. This means that aside from skill on you, that's it. Global tech is waiting for a great talent like you. You need for this program.
Mike, you're muted. Yes, you're speaking.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Next, we have the Emigrates, which is pronounced Emigrate with an 8. So it provides tech-enabled visa opportunities for people in tech, either the business or the technical side of tech. So this gives you opportunities to live and work in countries like UK, USA, Canada, and France. So this, as you can see on your screen here, these are the services that the Emigrates cover: general inquiry, coaching and handholding, and the rest of them. So these are the services under the Immigrate program. We have the free and we have the premium services available. So if you're interested in any of these, the first thing you need to do is indicate interest at bincom.net/immigrate. And then you request for Immigrate service at blog.bincom.net/immigrate pricing. And we have the Immigrate Open Days, which holds typically 2 Wednesdays in a month. And we also have video recordings of past editions, right? So if you want to be part of this, visit bincom.net/immigrate open dates to book a spot. So we have the Labs by Bincom, which is an initiative that helps techies to hone their tech skills if they've just picked up a skill, or you're looking to start up something with a team, because this is a program that brings together different people with different tech skills. You work together to build a startup from scratch. So if you're interested, and if you'd like to be the if you want to be part of the next cohort of Labs by Bincom, visit bincom.net/labs to get started. So Bincom Dev Center is in partnership with MyCircle, which brings the ability for techies to earn from the network and also positive social influence. So you earn 10% from Bincom Dev Center for any of these services which you refer. Say, for example, you refer someone to the Global Tech Program. Automatically, you earn 10% of that, which is 120,000 naira. So if you want to be part of this, the link there, this is where you get the link to be part of this. All right, so you can send us a mail at bincomdevcenter@bincom.net. If you want to contact us, you can call the number that is displayed on your screen, or you can visit our website, www.bincomdevcenter.com. So at this point, I'll take questions and feedbacks based on my presentation, if there is any. If there is none, I would like to thank our speakers for being with us here today, making out the time to be with us. It's been quite an interesting session, and I believe people on this call have learned a thing or two about JavaScript and its future in the tech industry. I've also asked some questions and I've been cleared on those questions. Thank you very much to the speakers. And at this point, I bid you all farewell and have a lovely weekend. Thank you once again for being part of this. Ciao.
Okay, Ken, thank you for being around.
Thank you very much, guys. It's good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you too. Thank you.
All right.